Great, recording now.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna share my presentation with y'all. That one, share it. Can you guys all see the first slide? Thumbs up. Awesome. All right, let me make sure that my chat with y'all is still visible. One more. There you go. Got my chat. Okay, great. So, oh, every time I click it, it scrolls ahead. Got it. We're going to be talking about accessing financial resources right now. Um, so our topics are going to be economic impact payments, those two $1,200 checks that you may have heard about, grants and loans, and then a kind of key part of all that, which is how to prepare and file your taxes. Um, so the economic impact payments or stimulus checks are a kind of an interesting idea on the part of the federal government to actually send people cash. Sort of it's a big deal in terms of things that the federal government has done during a crisis for the US. Um, so each adult in the US can qualify for up to two $1,200 payments and 500 per child. So the amount that you can receive through this is based on your income in 2018 or 2019. Which year depends on the tax return you've most recently filed. So if you filed your 2019 taxes, it'll be based on your income in 2019. And if you haven't yet filed your 2019 taxes, then it'll be based on your 2018. Most of the payments will be sent by direct deposit. Direct deposit is where your account and routing number lead directly to your bank account. And it's also called ACH. Or There's another word for it, blanking on it. Great. And so it's not a credit or a debit card. You have to have a bank account to receive the fastest form of payment. The Treasury has said they're looking at sending prepaid debit cards to people who don't have bank accounts to increase accessibility. But like most things, it's going to take a little while to roll that out. They're hoping to send out the first $1,200 payment by the end of April, but we'll see. It's kind of anybody's guess. The most important thing you have to do to qualify for these payments is to have filed your taxes for 2018 or 2019. And so that's why I'm going to spend a fair bit of this evening talking about how to file your taxes. So how do you file your taxes? You have to do it? Oh no. Well, yes, there's only two exceptions to needing to file your taxes in order to get this stimulus check. So if you receive Social Security or railroad benefits and are not required to file taxes, then you do not need to file taxes in order to get the economic impact payments. If you had no income in 2018 or 2019 and weren't going to file a return at all, there is a special way to file an information return. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The IRS is also looking at releasing a streamlined version of in just giving them some info on their website. I'll be sure there's a link included in the document you guys are going to get at the end of this where that may or may not show up. We don't know yet. So if you're going to file your taxes, one of the first things you might want to do is get your transcript. So if you have no idea what income has been reported for you in the year you're trying to file taxes, you can go online to the IRS's website, and in about 5 minutes of inputting a bunch of like annoying personal information, you can get your transcripts. In order to do that, you have to have filed taxes at least once in the past 7 years. And you also have to have one of these like identity verifying pieces of information: credit card, student loan, auto loan, or home loan. You have to have an email address and a cell phone. And on the IRS Get Transcript service, transcripts are available for your wages and incomes for the prior year each July, typically, although it varies a little. So next time. My favorite tax return software, if you are self-preparing your taxes, is free1040taxreturn.com. Can't recommend it enough. They will never nickel and dime you. Super simple, easy to use layout. They're not going to take you through 30 confusing questions. The navigation is like pretty 2010. But it is a really great website for just super simple filing your taxes. They have a special system set up to do an informational return. You can just enter a $0 return in their system, and they'll automatically plug in $1 in the interest income slot so that you can send it in. I'll get back to more details about taxes a little later in the presentation. But first, I wanted to talk about grants and loans. So here is the first time you're seeing this link to a big Google Doc that I've been putting together with lots of resources and also almost all of the information that I'm talking about tonight. So there's a ton of grants and loans available for people who are missing out on income right now because of the measures that are being taken to limit the spread of COVID-19. Many of them are really easy to apply for. If you've ever done a regular loan application, it can take months and you need all of these complicated financial statements. Right now, a lot of these, particularly smaller grants, and a grant is money you don't have to repay, have like a 5-minute application. You already know all the answers. There's tons of options from the federal government, including expanded SBA loan programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, which is kind of a headache to apply for, but you can talk to your bank about options for getting the Paycheck Protection Program. Even people who are self-employed and independent contractors can qualify for it, for the payments you'd usually make to yourself. There are also a lot of privately funded options right now, not just from nonprofits. So check out that link and all of the places that it can lead you to look at grants and loans. So here's kind of the best stuff to look for. So you're looking for grants, first of all, because you don't have to pay back grants. It's just money for you. And the next best thing is zero interest loans and loans with deferred payments. Deferred payments means that you don't have to make your first payment on the loan for however long. Right now, I'm seeing a lot of options that let you delay payments for 6 months. A zero interest loan is a loan where you have to pay back the amount that was given to you, but no more than that. Some of the government-funded options right now are SBA loans, disaster loans, and regular loans. Those can have interest rates as low as, I think, 3.75% and up to a 30-year repayment period, which is a long time. And the SBA disaster loan can include a $10,000 grant. The Paycheck Protection Program can have forgivable funds, which is essentially if you use the money for it for the exempt purposes, which is paying employees, including yourself, and paying rent, utilities, or interest on other debt obligations, then you can get that portion of loan funds forgiven. So it's essentially a grant. Otherwise, the Paycheck Protection Program typically has 1% interest and a 2-year repayment period. Things to avoid, the stuff to look out for are high interest loans, which would be loans that have above, say, 8% interest right now. You should be able to find a lot of things that have 5 to 7% interest right now because rates have been cut. You might have heard that term in the news. It's a complicated like central banking concept that I'm not going to go into, but the upshot of it is if you have a mortgage, this could be a good time to refinance. There are a lot of great resources out there, and many of them will fund really rapidly. They're trying to get people an initial payment within a week or 10 days so that you can have the cash you need for your expenses. On to taxes. So this is going to particularly emphasize taxes for freelance, contract, and self-employed workers. If you're working as an employee, your income is going to be on a W-2 and it's going to be a little more straightforward. For people who are doing a variety of jobs or work for themselves, it can be a lot more complicated. So where might your income be coming from? Reported income will come on either a 1099 MISC or a W-2 or a variety of other non-earned income reports. So a 1099 MISC would be when you're not an employee, when you're a contractor or a freelancer. So that is subject to self-employment tax. And with a 1099 MISC, there's no withholding. So say that you got $700 on that 1099 MISC, you're gonna have to pay some of that in taxes, even though you got the full amount upfront. And that can be really tricky because you have to not spend it all and you have to save some for taxes. But the bright side with contractor and self-employment income, freelance income, is you can write off what are called ordinary and necessary business expenses. I'm going to go into a lot of detail about what those are in a little bit. For a W-2, the taxes are withheld. So you've probably had a W-2 and you've noticed this. You might be making $10 or $20 an hour, but the money that you get in your actual paycheck makes it feel like you're only getting $8, $15 an hour. You're not getting all of it. And where is it going? It's the taxes. And they're being withheld. But when you file your tax return, you can get a refund. You can get that money back if they withheld more than is calculated to be what you owe. And so that's kind of one of the key differences between a W-2 and a 1099 MISC, is that with a 1099 MISC, you get it all up front, and then you are responsible for setting aside money for taxes. With a W-2, the taxes are withheld and you don't get them. Then when you file your return, you can get that money back that was yours in the first place. You may have income that wasn't reported to the IRS if you're self-employed or own a business, but you still have to report that income. So it's up to you to find it, figure out how much it was. The nice thing about income is you don't have to separate it by income stream. When you're self-employed or running a business, your income for ordinary business operations, whatever it is your business is doing, just goes all into one pot on one line. So income is like pretty easy to present, but you do have to find it all. And then there's all the other stuff. So many places you could have income from. You can have investments. You can have rental income. You could be an owner of a partnership or an LLC or a corporation. You could have a trust. There's a million of them. So don't spend too much time trying to figure all these out. You probably know if you have anything in that category. Um, so how do you document business expenses? So the general rule is that you need to be able to verify 4 pieces of information for any business expense that you want to write off. You have to be able to verify the date, the vendor, the amount, and what was purchased. So one of the easiest ways to do that is with a receipt. A receipt must sort of legally always have all of that information. Every once in a while, you might shop at a smaller store that gives you a really short, small receipt. But that's pretty uncommon, especially these days. If you didn't save your receipts, are you screwed? The answer is no. It's not that bad. So you can generally get those 4 pieces of information from a bank or a credit card statement. On your bank or credit card statement, you'll usually be able to see the vendor. You'll always be able to see the date. You'll always be able to see the amount. And typically from the vendor, you can derive what was purchased. It's pretty clear that if you were shopping at like PS Print, as an example, that you were getting advertising materials or maybe packaging materials like stickers or labels for a product. This can be a little trickier with a vendor like Costco or Target, where you could have been buying almost anything. So those are the vendors where it's the most important to save receipts. Although if you only have bank transactions, it's okay. It's just not the best. And the other thing about expenses is they have to be categorized. So there are a bunch of default categories for business expenses. Advertising, vehicle mileage, professional fees, contractors, insurance, rent, utilities, travel, a whole bunch of default categories. You can look up Schedule C online. You can say like IRS Schedule C, and you'll be able to see all of the basic expense categories. A couple that I often add are parking and tolls and professional development. Those are probably my top 2 categories that I'll add to the basic ones on a Schedule C. There are a couple of special types of expenses. The standard mileage rate, which has to do with how you write off expenses for your vehicle. So writing off expenses for your vehicle for work, if it's a personal vehicle that you drive for work and for other things, or if it's a vehicle that's used primarily for work and your fleet of vehicles, your fleet, that's the term they use, is less than 5 vehicles, then you're going to be using the standard mileage rate or the actual expenses. So for either standard mileage or actual expenses, you're still going to be tracking mileage. So let's say that you drove 10,000 miles total in 2019. Your odometer at the start of the year was at 90,000, and at the end of the year it was at 100,000. And let's say that half of that was for work and half of that was for personal use. So if you use the standard mileage rate, you'll take half of that mileage, 5,000 miles, you'll multiply it by the standard mileage rate, and that is the amount you'll write down for your car and truck expenses. Um, if you're using actual expenses, then you're going to take that same proportion, in this case 50%, and you're going to multiply that by all of the vehicle expenses that fall into the standard mileage rate. So that includes cost of the vehicle, any repairs, any maintenance, anytime you get the car cleaned, any car insurance, any vehicle registration. I'm probably forgetting one. Uh, but it does not include parking and tolls. You can write off parking and tolls in addition. And so then for all of those expenses that fit into the standard mileage rate bucket, if you're doing actual expenses, you'll multiply those by the ratio of business miles to personal miles. So if you spent $5,000 on your car, including all of those things, insurance, repairs, car payments, all that, then your lost my train of thought. If you're then your total that you'll write on that car and truck expenses line is the proportion of those actual expenses. So half of them in this example. Then there's another there's another group of special expenses. And that is ones that you need to record the specific business purpose. So that includes meals, travel, gifts, transportation, and entertainment. So every time you have an expense that you want to put in one of those categories, you need to have a little log that lets you record what the purpose of it was. So who you were having the meal with, where you were going, what the gift was for. Next topic is health insurance and taxes. So beginning in 2019, there's no more tax for not having health insurance. It was called the individual responsibility payment. So that doesn't apply in 2019. There's a really important tax form called a 1095-A. If you bought health insurance through the state marketplace, which in California is called Covered California, then you need that 1095-A when you file your taxes. You can get it from the Covered California website. That's the easiest place. But if you've forgotten your login for it, it can be like such a process to get back on there. So hopefully you got it in the mail. And then the other thing to keep in mind about health insurance and taxes is that if you're a freelance, contractor, self-employed worker, you can deduct your health insurance premiums against business profit. There's a few more things that are important for your taxes. You're probably going to run into terms that you don't recognize, concepts that you're not sure of. A lot of the time, if you don't know what it is, it may not apply to you, but online searches will go a long way toward letting you educate yourself. And there are so many more things that can be relevant to your taxes, your marital status, your children, whether or not you own a house, any investments that you have, education and student loans, goes on and on. There is a bottom to it. I often like to joke that so far pets aren't relevant, but if you do have an animal who is a medical support for you, that could be on your taxes. So nothing is safe. And the last note about taxes is don't forget your state taxes. Most tax prep websites will charge you to prepare state taxes, but the state of California has an absolutely awesome online filing um, service called CalFile. It's free. It's really easy to use. You get to it from the California Franchise Tax Board's website. And California, if you're lower income or self-employed, is pretty great about giving refunds and credits. So you may well get, $100 or $200 for filing your California taxes. So totally go for it. And then here's my last slide, which is, again, this link to this Google Doc that I am curating with lots of resources, a link to these slides, my business email address in case you have questions or need some tax prep help. I'm a little busy this time of year, but we'll see what we can do. And then these two websites for preparing your taxes. Thanks for listening to all of that technical information. I've got a couple questions to get started on in the chat.
Jay,
You,
let me just read the disclaimer again. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was super awesome, and these resources are super useful. Thank you so much for putting that Google Doc together and for sharing it. I do want to just read the disclaimer again because it wasn't in this recording. And so I want to just mention that the Safety Net Fund, which organized this presentation, is not providing taxation or legal advice. Any content provided here is for educational purposes only and should not be used as a basis for your tax preparation. If you need help doing your taxes, please consult a tax professional. Jay, for example, there's their email address. There's somebody else you know. The other thing to mention is MobileCoin is a company that let us use their Zoom, but they're not responsible for any content of this meeting. And now Jay will take some questions.
So here we can stop the screen share and go to my face. Woohoo! All right. So the first question that I see is a pretty good one. What if your business expenses exceed your profits? You have tons of receipts. Do you have to make copies of them when you file online? And what if you spent a ton on your business? You can report a loss on a business. The technical rule is that you cannot have a loss on your business for more than 2 out of any given 5 years without keeping records to show that you are running your business with an intent to profit. So that includes keeping formal bookkeeping, making real sales, doing advertising, doing other compliance things, filing your taxes. There's a nice list about that. But sort of the short answer is it's totally fine to have a loss. So for receipts, what you're gonna do when you total your expenses is you're gonna like put the receipts in a pile. Like these ones are for supplies. These ones were for travel. These ones were for professional services. And you're gonna add them all up. So you're gonna come up with one number at the end, which is like this whole pile of supplies receipts equals $5,672.48. And that's the number that you're going to use. And then you want to keep the receipts. It can be good to digitize them. Technically speaking, you should keep those records for 11 years after the year of filing. 7 years is pretty good, but there are some aspects of what's called the statute of limitations that can extend for 10 years after the filing due date. So totally cool to have a business loss is the answer there. Let's see, what's the next question? So next question is about the Paycheck Protection Program. So how do you calculate payroll if you're the only person who works at your business or if you're the owner of an LLC? So the answer to that is that your payroll is the amount that you're taking home. So if you are self-employed or you have a single owner LLC, and and you did your Schedule C, and at the end of your Schedule C for 2019, you had, let's say, $15,000 left over after business expenses. That $15,000 is the amount that your business spent on payroll last year. And so you would use that number for calculating your Paycheck Protection Program eligibility. If you have a partnership, it'll be the same thing, but you'll use the net profit for the business from your Form 1065, the partnership return. More questions. Yeah, so filing for unemployment. All right, I'm gonna crack this one over the next couple days. It sounds like the short version is that the software is not ready for self-employed people yet for unemployment filings. I know that they are doing a bunch of updates on the unemployment online filing system tonight, and fingers crossed that those updates tonight are going to be adding the options for people who are self-employed or freelance to be able to qualify for unemployment insurance payments, but no guarantees. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that. And as soon as I figure it out, I'm going to put it in the Google Doc that you guys have the link for, those COVID financial resources. So unfortunately, the answer to I'm self-employed, I've been told that I can file for unemployment is the software is not ready yet. The phone lines are backed up. We just have to wait, which is a bummer. Next question is about SBA disaster loans. There's a bunch of questions here. So the first one is, can you receive the grant only and not take out a loan? The answer I have is I'm not sure. There might be some information about that buried deep in the language of the CARES Act, but it hasn't been widely publicized yet, and I haven't sat down and read the legislation. So I am not sure about that one. When do you find out if you get it? You'll find out about SBA disaster loans whenever the SBA gets around to processing them. I'm sure they're working as fast as they can and are hiring new staff to help them handle the current volume, but I think it's going to be slow. You will get to have a dialogue with the SBA about how much you want to take out for your loan, how much you need, the interest rate, and the repayment terms. To request an economic impact payment, you don't have to do anything aside from have filed your taxes in 2018 or 2019 and have made less than $99,000. Payments for the economic impact payment are $1,200 for individuals with income up to $75,000 a year, and then it phases out by $99,000 a year.
Sorry, Jay, just to clarify that last question, if you didn't file your taxes in 2018, then the right thing to do would be to just go file your taxes right now ASAP so that you get into their system.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's kind of a steep barrier to qualify for something that is meant to really help the people most in need. So again, kind of fingers crossed that in the next month, we'll see another way that people can get their information to the IRS to qualify for the economic impact payment. The next question I see is about the Paycheck Protection Program. Are independent contractors required to have a business account? This is kind of a tricky question. So the Paycheck Protection Program is being administered by banks and SBA 7A lenders. So technically speaking, you don't need to have a business bank account. That said, of the 4 or 5 clients I've worked with so far, all of their banks received more loan inquiries than they could process by like the end of last weekend. Um, so if you don't have a business bank account, probably you should look at reaching out to an SBA lender who's not a bank. Um, and we'll see how much money shakes loose and how much goes to whom. It's we can only hope that there's enough money in that to go around.
And having said that, people should probably do it ASAP because it seems like it's like on first come, first serve situation.
Yeah,
So that's
that
probably like the best. If that's something that people are interested, it's probably best to do it like tonight or tomorrow morning.
mhm. One of the easiest ways to apply for that is through nav.com, NAV. They're a lender aggregator, and they're doing a special program for the Paycheck Protection Program. So that's been my recommendation when people ask, like, my bank won't help me with this. I don't have a relationship with an SBA lender. How do I do this? That's the best resource I've found so far. Um, let's see, next question. Does a receipt have to have proof of payment on it? The answer is no. It doesn't have to have the type of payment. A receipt does have to indicate that it's paid. It can't just be an unpaid invoice, um, depending on your accounting method. I'm going to assume that you guys are all doing cash accounting, not accrual. Um, that gets into some technical accounting stuff that is beyond the scope of today's discussion.
Isn't a receipt definitionally a piece of paper that proves that you paid, which is different than from an invoice? So a receipt is
Technically,
different
yeah.
than an invoice, I think is the
Yeah.
answer to that question.
Yeah. Or like a receipt is good, an invoice, depending on your accounting method, may not be sufficient. Um, Next question. Let's see. Ah, let's see. I will put the link in the chat. Let's see. Here's a question about filing your taxes for 2019, but not having reported much income. If you've lost your job, but you didn't have much income reported on your taxes last year, but you had gotten, say, hired for a new job at the end of 2019, or you started your job in 2020, and then you lost your job recently, your unemployment will be based on the job you recently lost. It won't be based on your income in 2019. Um, and similarly, the if you were self-employed, I'm pretty sure that unemployment will be based on, say, your 3 most recent months of self-employment income. So your profit and loss from the first quarter of 2020. But for that one, we'll just have to see what kinds of documentation they'll accept. Here's a question. Can you apply for unemployment and the Paycheck Protection Program? The answer to that is yes, that's fine. Let's see. Another question asks if I am a CPA. The answer is no, I am not a CPA. I am what's called a registered tax preparer. So I haven't gone to grad school to be an accountant, which is what you have to do to be a CPA. I decided not to do that for 4 years. It was a strong personal choice. Let's see, for people who have foreign earned income, I do not know a ton about that off the top of my head. I haven't worked with many clients who have foreign earned income. I might be able to offer some advice one-on-one, but I can definitely refer you out to somebody who would have more info. Let's see. If you filed in 2018, how would you know? And how could you give them direct deposit info? Those are great questions. So you can confirm your filing status with that IRS get transcript tool that I mentioned. Um, and if you don't have the information that you need to access that, I think there's another tool on the IRS's website that lets you look at that. Um, but I can't remember. Worth hunting down and adding that resource to my Google Doc. Um, and then how do you get the IRS direct deposit info if you filed your taxes but they didn't have it? This is a great question. Um, I should totally have mentioned it earlier. So how that works is at some point in the near future, the IRS has said that they're going to add a kind of like a portal where you can put your direct deposit info in for them. There's a link to the place where that's going to appear near the top of the Google Doc that I prepared. And once that has come into existence, it will definitely be linked and like highlighted with like some neon arrows pointing at it, because that's going to be like a key item is getting your most recent direct deposit info to the IRS. Um, let's see, what else? Um, question is the $99,000 income cap for gross or net? The answer is that your income to qualify for the economic impact payment is based on your adjusted gross income, your AGI. So that's your income after business expenses and after a few tax credits, although not quite all of them. So it's a lot less than your gross income. It's your adjusted gross income, as they say. Oh yeah, here's a recommendation to check out cabbage.com for SBA loans and the Paycheck Protection Program. Great tip. Let's see. Yeah, so here is how do you document income if you started your business in 2020 and therefore you don't have a tax return for that business? Um, and so you'll document your income with what's called an income statement or a profit and loss. Or if your business is a nonprofit, it's called a statement of activity. Um, and then all of the numbers on that are going to be backed up by bank transactions, invoices, and receipts. So for businesses, you'll have to prepare financial statements for to qualify for some of these benefits. You won't need that for the economic impact payments, but you might need that for unemployment as a self-employed person. That remains to be seen. Um, let's see. Which programs should you apply to if you haven't made much money and you haven't filed your taxes yet? Um, if you had jobs lined up that hadn't yet paid you, but were planning to during this time, you can get unemployment as a self-employed person because you had an expectation of payment, but it hasn't yet come in. And then similarly, a lot of grants and loans will apply in that situation. I don't know if things like the Paycheck Protection Program would be the best option there, but an SBA disaster loan could be a good choice in that context. Let's see. Here is another question. Can freelancers apply for the Paycheck Protection Program? And the answer is yes. And the process for that is not perfectly clear yet, but basically you're going to need to know either what your average monthly income was in 2019 for the whole year, if you were operating your business for that whole year, or for the first 3 months of 2020, if you were not operating your business for the full year in 2019. Um, Here's a question about if your most recently filed tax return has a different address from your current address, can you update your address with the IRS? It's going to be a bit of a pain, is the short answer. If you're hoping to get a check instead of direct deposit and you don't have a current mailing address on your most recently filed tax return with the IRS, probably your best bet is to uh, use the United States Postal Service option to have your mail routed from your old address to your new address for 6 months. So that way you won't miss that check. So that's my recommendation if your most recently filed tax returns address doesn't match your current address.
Jay, that was actually a question from a friend of mine, and they they have subleased around, they've bounced around a bunch last year, and they're not even sure where
Mm.
that would be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there an option to notify the government, like the IRS, of what is the current address?
There is a way to do it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I will make a note to add that to the Google Doc with resources.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Um, let's see. And then there is some more questions rolling in. I think we'll go for like 5 more minutes. That'll be about an hour. So let's see. There's a question about beginning self-employment sometime during 2019 and having left a salaried job during 2019. And the question is, can you get unemployment for your former job at that pay rate? And the answer is no. You will get unemployment insurance to make up for the amount of income that you've most recently lost as a result of losing hours at work, or if you're self-employed as a result of lost income because your business had to reduce or stop operations due to measures that have been taken to limit the spread of COVID. Um, so unemployment is like fairly specific about like a recent hardship that has befallen. Um, and then the next question is, would I recommend that people file their 2019 taxes ASAP? Or are there reasons why it might be better to wait if you had low income? I can't think of any reason why it would be good to wait, particularly if your income is in that range. Say in 2018, your income was above $75,000, but in 2019, your income was below that. It would be advantageous in terms of the economic impact payment to file your 2019 taxes, because then your economic impact payment will be based on that income that's most recently filed. Question here is about changing addresses. If you know you're going to be moving in the near future and you want to make sure you get mail consistently, getting a PO box or a virtual mailbox is really great. There are a lot of virtual mailbox options that are less than $100 a year. So if you're moving a lot, that can be a game changer. You get your postal mail in your email, they scan it for you. I have a number of clients I work with who have virtual mailboxes. And that's like a huge asset for people who move a lot to have a consistent address. Here is a question about, is there anything special to think about if you're filing with income less than $15,000? My one recommendation there is to make sure that you're getting the earned income tax credit, because you can get money back for that earned income tax credit, and that's awesome. Money from the government. All right. I think I'm gonna wrap up there. Um, Thank you so much for all the questions. Feel free to email me, Facebook message me, keep checking back on that Google Doc for updates of information. Really a pleasure to share all this. This is kind of the stuff that I do all day, every day, and it's fun to get to talk about it. And please share the Google Doc and these slides and all of this information far and wide. It
Could you
is
just actually throw up the screen share of that last slide for the
totally.
presentation so that people could just take a look at that again if there's anybody new here?
Ta-da!
Sweet, thank you. We'll just keep this up for a few minutes. Yeah, thank you, Jay, again for this presentation. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. Hopefully, people learned some things, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity for organizing this and drawing such a large crowd. This feels like incredibly worthwhile. Really glad to get information out there. If you see anything that's incorrect in all of this, let me know. Um, a lot of this information is even changing every day. So I am definitely like humble enough that I would love to know if there's something that should be corrected or updated.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody, and good luck. Keep making art.